It's like no light. Light.
Boom.
No light. Why didn't we do this before? So.
I'm stealing your thunder.
Steal my thunder. Where? So today on the Dan Fixes Shit episode, Kika apparently doesn't exist because all those videos are about me crawling into small spaces. Should just call this the Dan Crawls Into Small Spaces YouTube vlog on a boat. I don't know. How have you been these past few weeks? Wait, what the hell? Where are you? You're good. Whoa. Well, yesterday they had to take the water trailer away because apparently there's a leak somewhere else and they had to recall all of their trailers to go supply water to whatever building lost their water. And as of last night, we emptied our tanks as well. So we are left with our little emergency 5-liter bottle of water, which is already almost half empty, which means I've got 2.5 liters of water until the water maker needs to work. So this is like our
countdown.
This is our countdown. This is like our egg timer, our sand in the egg timer. Hopefully I can finish today so we can start making water, or we're gonna have to
melt some snow.
But there's no snow. It's 9 degrees today. Look at this. It's 9 degrees today. It's so warm outside. Yeah. Maybe we can get them to turn the hose on. Wouldn't that be funny? Like the day we install our water makers, the day they turn the hose back on.
or the hose isn't frozen anymore, so exactly. The water keeps running. But like it's so hot inside. I'm wearing like a tiny little t-shirt.
I know. I haven't seen this much skin.
Ooh.
Whoa.
Like my sweater is out.
From -20 to 8 in 2 weeks. I think winter's over already. It's not even the end of February.
Hello, bye.
Winter's over. Came for a week. It's gone. Bye.
I told you it was going to last one day. You didn't believe me. It wasn't -19
just
all
on your
the
birthday.
time.
It's like it's Kika's birthday. Let's freeze everything.
Right. Oh,
all right. I've got a lot of work to do today. So can you?
Oh, we're going down underneath.
Go back there.
Yeah.
My lady. I need you to work from home today. You can't work in the office today. You have to work from home. Yeah. Alright, well I've pretty much finished plumbing all of the water maker and I have most of the systems set up. The last plumbing project is running this 1/4-inch flexible hose from the water maker into our tank. That's where the product water is going to come through and fill our tanks. The problem is that where it's accessed is underneath the nook and it's covered with stuff. And then we also have to run this behind the nav desk and to the water maker, which is underneath Kika. Are you gonna help me with this? Because we have to like rip apart this whole side of the boat just to run this stupid little hose through.
We're gonna play Tetris.
Yeah, it's gonna get messy. Well, now that we've got the whole port side of the hull cleaned out, we can run the product water tube, this little 1/4-inch tube, and a wire through that's going to be for the float switch that tells the water maker when the tank is full and it automatically shuts off so you can't overfill your tanks. It's pretty small, pretty easy to run, but we're going to need to fish it through here somehow. What if I bent the tip a little bit?
That's exactly what I need you to do.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, that's 2 down and like 4 to go.
Hands up for the kid. Never ever let you down. Gotta go it, go it, go it.
I also drilled a hole in the tank access hatch to install this little float switch. There's a little reed switch in there, and when the tank is full, this float goes up and activates it, which shuts the water maker off, so you can't overfill your tanks. This little switch is actually pretty important. I'm putting in the access hatch so that if we ever need to like replace it or fix it or test it, it's really easy to access and get it back out again. Call this my third hand. It's the one that holds the pulls the soldering iron trigger, so I don't have to hold it. Works quite well actually.
Look at this mess.
Oh my goodness. I know, right?
What are you doing?
You know, ripping apart perfectly fine things and making them better. This is the bit of circuitry that runs the whole water maker. Everything plugs into this one box, but it has from the factory, and now it had a switch on the front to make it switch between service mode, auto, and manual. But the problem is this box and the pump are mounted in the cockpit locker, and every time we do service on it, I don't want to have to like pull everything out of the cockpit locker just to access this little switch. So I made my own switch, service, auto, and manual, and now I'm mapping how they wired theirs and running a new wiring harness to wire this switch inside here, so when we open up all the compartments, we can just change back and forth between the different modes without having to crawl in the cockpit locker. But it's don't want to screw this up, and it's a little bit confusing, so I've labeled like everything. So hopefully I don't mess this up. All right, I have finished wiring everything in here. So now, I think all I have left to do is to go install it in the cockpit locker. All right, last night I finished wiring all the rest of the connections down in the cockpit locker underneath the pump housing, and this morning I just installed the Connect screen. It's powered and all the data management is run just through a single Ethernet, so that's super convenient. It's sort of temporarily installed in our panel for now because, spoiler alert, we have a few more plans for this panel, but for now it's in there and it's looking good. So the only thing left to do is pop the fuse in and hopefully everything goes smoothly. Do a bit of a smoke test and then start making water. I've got the feed hose running into the sink right now, so I'll be able to test it before it goes into our tanks. But everything's done, finally. I think it definitely would have been faster if we had just stuck with the original version of installing it rather than trying to modify everything so it fits into our tiny little space. But overall, it fits in there really, really well. Everything's perfect. There's space for everything, and the install went smoothly. So time for a smoke test. Fingers crossed everything works well. On. Brine discharge is on. Both of these filters are in. Switch is on run. This is plumbed, this is plumbed. Brine is on. This is on, this is connected. I think we're ready. There it is. Pressure relief valve open now. Yes. System starting at 8. Moment of truth. Hopefully this goes well. 2, 1. Time remaining, 39 minutes. It has to purge all the chemicals out, so I'm going to be checking to make sure that nothing's leaking and everything's going well while it purges everything. So far it sounds good. You can hear everything gurgling in here. So far so good. Both filters are full of water. No air bubbles, that's good. I guess it's time to go check to make sure we're getting brine discharged overboard. Looks good. I plumbed the brine discharge into our cockpit drain, the scupper on the side of the boat. That's where everything else is plumbed into as well. And so it tees down into a pipe, and now we've got brine water coming out. So far everything's looking good. Now it's doing what's called a product purge. So it's actually pressurized, it's making fresh water, but it's sending all that fresh water overboard to make sure the system's all cleaned out before we put fresh water into our tanks. And now the system's running at full capacity and the pumps are running at full capacity. You can hear the pressure pump spinning, and then the pulsating back and forth is the Clark pump and the pressure recovery system pump. Actually pretty quiet. It's a lot quieter than I was expecting it to be, so that's good. Once I put the covers and the cushions back on, it's going to be even quieter. But I'm checking for leaks first. I swear that the construction going on outside is louder than the water maker itself. They're redoing a bunch of siding, they're ripping apart a street out here. Yeah, so far it looks really good. There's one tiny little leak, one tiny little leak that I can see, which means I'm gonna have to pull a piece of PEX off. There might be a little bit of a burr on the plastic or something. Considering I replumbed all of this with used PEX that I've been using for years, replumbing and reorganizing all of our fresh water, the fact that there's only one leak is actually pretty good. We love using PEX. It works really well because you can reconfigure it over and over and over again and just keep reusing the same pieces. These ones that these push lock systems that we use are from a company called Aqualock. Ooh, that sun is bright. These little push fittings. They're called, these ones, they're called C-Tech. They're branded as C-Tech, but if you search for Aqualock on a site like Defender, you'll find them. And these ones in particular have worked out really well for us in the past. We've tried a bunch of different versions of these push lock systems, and these Aqualock ones, these black Aqualock ones, work really well. They're 15 millimeters, so you have to get 15 millimeter PEX. You can't use ½ inch, but Defender also sells that, and it's the standard around the world, so it's easy to find outside of North America. Like us, since we've been renovating and reconfiguring the plumbing system on our boat multiple times, it's been nice to not have to go out and buy new fittings every time. We can just reuse these over and over again. But it does mean that occasionally the seal might get a little bit damaged, or pushing them on and off the PEX multiple times might make a little bit of a burr in the plastic of the tubing itself. And so you just need to kind of heat it up and melt that burr out and then put it back together. My guess is that's what's happening down there in the water maker, is that it's probably a little bit of a burr on that piece of plastic. So I'll pull it off when it's done purging in another 30 minutes and then fix it. It's really cool. The screen actually shows quite a bit of information too. Check this out. I really like having that much information, easy access right in our panel where we look at our battery condition and stuff as well. That way when we're making water, we can see just exactly what the condition of the filters are in, condition of the water coming out, the quantity of the water coming out. Yeah, I'm gonna close everything up and hopefully it'll sound a little bit quieter with the cushions on it, and wait for the tanks to fill so I can do a freshwater flush and make sure that that system works. And after that, it'll be done. Well, now that the water maker is all installed and we've had a chance to test it a bit, even though the water outside is really, really dirty, everything's working as expected. And so how about I give you a little bit of a tour of how it all went together and how it all works. So the whole system starts by sucking in seawater. It comes in through this hose, which we attached to the old through hull where the old engine would get its cooling water from. We kept that through hull installed there and replaced it when we hauled out at Just Catamarans a few years ago, because we knew one day we'd be installing a water maker in here and we'd be using that through hull to bring in the raw water. So that raw water comes in and it goes through a sea strainer. Well, first it goes through a check valve and then it goes through a sea strainer. So any big chunks or sea life gets stuck there, and it's easy to access, so we can take it out, clean it out in the sink if we ever need to, and then put it back in. From there, it goes into a boost pump, which takes that raw water and sends it over to the feed pump, which is the big pump installed in the cockpit locker. Because that larger pressure pump is a vane pump, it's not a diaphragm pump, it means it can't self-prime. So this little pump on the back of the raw water strainer basically primes the system, and it's super quiet and doesn't really consume any power. On top of the sea strainer is where the freshwater flush connects into the system. And that little check valve I mentioned earlier is what prevents us from just dumping fresh water overboard. So when it's time to freshwater flush, solenoid opens underneath the galley, fresh water comes into the top of the sea strainer and pushes fresh water through the entire system all the way out the brine hose so that it's just fresh water. So every 5 days or so, it runs a freshwater flush, which means nothing gross grows inside of the membranes and ruins the water maker. Close that before I freeze. From the raw water strainer, that raw water comes in and goes through two filter housings, a 20 micron and a 5 micron, which pretty much filter out all the rest of the visible particles left in the water. And what comes out looks clean, even though it still has salt in it. As we found in our last couple of tests, the water outside is really, really nasty because all the snow is melted and there's this really fine like silt in the water. And so this little 5 micron filter clogs up really, really quickly. So we're not gonna be running the water maker too much more while we're sitting here at this dock. But luckily this is the last project on our list, which means we're gonna be leaving soon and we can go make water out in the clean ocean. Also in this locker, I installed the valves for the freshwater flush coming in, the brine going overboard, and then these two valves in the middle, which are the service valves. So when it's time to pickle the system or if we ever need to clean it, we can turn the freshwater and the brine off, open up the service valves in and out, and then we can suck in the chemicals and have them cycle through whatever bucket we have sitting out here. That way, all the servicing happens in one convenient location, and it's gonna be really easy to do maintenance cycles on this thing. And underneath this big lid is the actual water maker itself, which includes the Clark pump, the pressure recovery pump, 2 short membranes, a little accumulator tank that helps with the pressure on the inline feed. And then back here is the diverter valve and salinity probe. So once the raw water comes through the 2 pre-filters, it actually goes to the main feed pump, which is the white box that I installed in the cockpit locker. And that just pressurizes that raw water up to, I think, 80 or 90 PSI. So about double what a household water pressure is. It comes back in through the accumulator tank and then into the pressure recovery pump or the Clark pump. Once the water gets inside this Clark pump, it's pressurized. It takes a high volume of low pressure water and creates a low volume of high pressure water, similar to the hydraulic brake pedals maybe in your car. Now that the water is high pressure, it comes out into these 2 membranes, and the high pressure pushes the fresh water through the membrane where the salt gets trapped behind. Now that fresh water comes through this little 1/4-inch feed pipe into the diverter valve over here. And if the salinity level is low enough, it opens up and it goes into our tanks. If the salinity level is still too high, it closes and it comes back into the Clark pump, which then gets pushed through the normal brine water that goes out and gets discharged overboard. We also rewired the main run switch into here so we don't have to climb into the cockpit locker and turn it on and off every time we need to do a service. And we made space for our spare pre-filters as well. So everything fits in here really, really well. And it's not like this system from the factory wasn't any good. It just wouldn't fit in our space, which is why we had to sort of disassemble and reconfigure it all so it would all fit much more compactly into our space. And that's about it for in here. Over in the control panel is where we installed the touchscreen, and that's where everything is controlled from and where we can monitor everything from. So this Spectra Connect panel and the brain and the sensors aren't a standard feature of the water maker. It's sort of an add-on. For us, in the way that we installed it on our boat, because we had to split all the different systems up into different lockers, having a manual system would have been a real pain. We would have had to crawl in the cockpit locker and flip valves and adjust things and turn things on and off. And making water would have been a real inconvenience. So although it seems like a luxury, it was a necessary upgrade to have everything run from this touch panel. So we can monitor everything from here, make water from here, and the whole system allows for the making of water to be a very streamlined, easy system. So for us, it was definitely worth it. And for all you overly label makery fans out there, check this out. Ready? Ready? Open, close. So that when you put it on the filter, close it that way, open it that way. Well, everything fits in here really, really well. All of the planning, all the prep work, all the 3D modeling paid off because it fits perfectly. And we made sure that all of the hoses connecting to the actual pump and membranes itself are easy to disconnect. So if we ever need to, we can just pull 4 screws and the whole thing will come out and we can service it out in the cockpit or here on the countertop, which will be a lot easier than trying to service it down here in this tiny little cramped hole. And since this thing is installed in our living space underneath the pilot berth, we wanted to make sure it was as quiet as possible, which is one of the reasons why we went with a pressure recovery pump. A standard pressure pump that a DIY system would use, or most of the other water makers out there use, are just too noisy to run inside the cabin. They might work in an engine compartment where it's already insulated with sound insulation, but on our boat, it would just be too loud to run while we're in here living. But the main reason why we went with a pressure recovery pump and we didn't build our own system is because we just can't afford the power to run it. A pressure recovery system like this is about 5 to 10 times more efficient than a standard pressure pump, and we can't afford to drain our battery bank every time we want to fill up our water tanks. So now that the system's on board and we've had a chance to test it a little bit, we can confirm that it actually uses the amount of power that Spectra claims it's supposed to use, which is a real bonus in the marine industry because most of the time we get appliances on board and their power draws aren't even close to what is on the label. So it's nice to know that this water maker on its high pressure setting will make 60 liters of water in an hour and it only draws 200 watts, which for us is perfect. But what we didn't know, that's on its high production setting. It has a low setting, which uses about 35% less power and only creates about 12% less water. So overall, it's about 25% more efficient than we were expecting it to be, which is a super bonus. It means that we can make 50 liters of water an hour and it only draws 130 watts, which is nothing. Our laptops draw more power than that, which is perfect. It means that when we're out sailing offshore or we're on anchor, we can make all the water we want and not really have to worry about the power draw from our battery bank or how we're going to put all that power back in from solar or regen while we're out sailing. There's a few other benefits to pressure recovery systems that no one really seems to talk about, and that is because it has a low pressure pump feeding the water into it, and that's the electrical components. All those electrical components are in our cockpit locker. If that pump ever fails, we could theoretically take a regular water pressure pump that we have spares of, like the one that we use to run our freshwater pressurized house system, plumb it into the front of this, pump some raw water through it. It might not be efficient, it might not be automated, but it would still make water, which is a pretty cool bonus. If any of the electrical system fails, we have a backup to make this thing work. Everything in here is mechanical. Another benefit is it pressurizes the water once, sends it through the membranes, and then uses that same pressurized water to push the pump back the other way. So the whole system uses about half as much raw water as a standard water maker, which means you double your pre-filter life, you double your membrane life. So overall, A system like this is much cheaper on the maintenance side in the long run than a standard DIY system, even if that system was less expensive to install in the first place. And that's about it. It's installed, it works, we've tested it, even though the water outside is disgusting and we burnt through it pre-filters already. Now that it's installed and working, we're pretty much ready to start sailing again, out into some cleaner water where we can make all the fresh water we want. So that'll pretty much wrap up this video. I hope you guys liked our water maker install series. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. Cheers. And in case you were curious, that little hiccup was Kika. She does exist. See?
I'm here.
Kika exists!
I'm just monitoring.
BTS.
I'm just monitoring what Din was saying, make sure that he said the right things.
Well, because you're the one that's going to take this SIM card and put it on this computer and
So
make
that
all the magic happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So that all the folks at home can enjoy a water maker video.
But I still haven't tested the water though.
No?
No.
Really?
I haven't tested it.
But you heard it running, yeah?
Yeah, it was running earlier. Yeah,
When you came home?
It was very quiet though.
Yeah.
Like you had to tell me it was running for me to realize what that like slight boom was every like couple minutes.
She literally came inside and was like, "Oh, how'd it go?" I'm like, "Good, it's working." She's like, "It's on now?
Yeah.
Really?" I was like, "Yeah, it's making water."
Yeah.
You haven't had a glass of water since you got back?
Pour me a clear glass of water. A clear glass of clear water. Oh.
You ready to? You saw how dirty the water is outside, right?
Yeah.
And you still
it's
want to
nasty.
drink some of this?
It looks.
It's like full of clay and silt and city. It looks pretty clean, doesn't it?
It looks
I guess this is like the ultimate test. It's easy
I mean,
to
there's
make.
still like some things, but I think that's mainly from the tanks.
It's probably from the dirty wine glass. Let's be honest.
Our tanks are pretty old, so
Yeah,
that's probably what it
that's
is.
the
But like
next
it looks
year's project.
clean. It smells.
Does it have good legs?
Smells normal.
How's the body?
How's the? Oh, look at that! It's beautiful. How do you say that in wine language? I don't know how you call when you do this. There's a term for it.
Swirl and sip, sip and swirl. I don't know. Dude, just drink it. No, don't spit it out. That took a lot to make that
Valuable
water.
water.
It's valuable. Don't you dare spit it out.
And they cost like $10,000. This glass of water costs $10,000.
Title for the video. It's good, yeah. I had a sip when I was testing it. It tastes
like water.
Yeah.
If I didn't know it was from the water maker, I would have not known.
We're definitely making that the title of this video. This glass of water cost $10,000.